Hello, and welcome to Come to Think of It. My name is Steve Nemirovsky, and I'm your host. For those of you who are familiar with my politics, you know that I have an equal contempt for both major parties. However, that pales in comparison for my contempt for the press and other news sources. This is particularly true with respect to the constant stream of stories written lately about the demise of our democracy. The bulwark of our democracy is the voting process, and the success of that process depends on informed voters. To that end, a free and independent press is crucial for a functioning democracy. It's a cornerstone of freedom and ensures that both the public is informed and that government actions are transparent. We have come to expect our politicians to run campaigns based on false promises and lies, which makes it all the more incumbent on the press to present factual and transparent reporting upon which voters can rely to make intelligent, informed choices. Unfortunately, news reporting has become as polarized as the parties. The press not only has to be free to report, but it has to be independent. If the press is truly concerned about our democracy, it could start by cleaning up its own act first. The best I can do to stay informed these days is to limit my news intake and attempt to find and read independent, balanced articles. I recently learned about Ad Fontes Media, a source that is attempting to rate the news for both bias and reliability. They've developed a valuable analytical tool from which to make informed views of the myriad choices from which we get our news. So for today's show, we are coming to think about news bias and reliability. We're going to start by examining the Ad Fontes methodology. We're joined by Vanessa Otero, the founder and CEO of Ad Fontes. Vanessa, welcome to Come to Think of It.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephen. Great to be here.
So we were talking off mic, and like me, you're a recovering attorney.
Yes.
What gave you the inspiration to leave the law, found Ad Fontes, and educate the world in the way you're doing?
Really, it was a passion that I've always had for news and politics, and especially for good arguments. You know, as a lawyer, you're presented with two sides of most every case, and in order to determine like which side is more correct, you have to evaluate the facts and evaluate the arguments that are underlying. Just because there's two sides to something doesn't mean that they're equal and opposite. So in the run-up to the 2016 election, I was really dismayed that it was Hillary versus Trump. It was a very contentious election, but it seemed a degree different from 2012 or 2008 in the way that my associates and family would talk to each other on social media. Like very vitriolic, people would share like really unreliable and highly polarized news sources to support their arguments, and they wouldn't end up convincing each other with good arguments. They'd end up disassociating with each other, just unfriending. And that's broken up a lot of families. So it hasn't really gotten better in the last 9 years since then. I created the initial media bias chart image. It went viral, and then a couple years later, I ended up starting a company to do that full time. Basically, add more news to the media bias chart, and we can talk about what that looks like today.
Sure. So you said you developed the first media bias chart. So obviously, right from the beginning, bias was something you wanted to focus on. How did you come to decide that that was an important factor?
Well, I didn't actually call it the media bias chart in the first place. I call it like a news quality chart because I thought the axes of both reliability, like how true something is generally, and how left and right something is, both are equally important, and they're related, but they're not they're not they're not perfectly correlated to each other. Highly, but not perfectly correlated. But when I put it out on the internet, people just called it the media bias chart. Like that is what the people have named it.
Okay, well, sometimes it's good to look into something. So you have bias being a concept, and then you chose the word reliability, which is a very interesting word to me. I came up with some other words we could have played with, like veracity, factual, accuracy, and you hit on reliability. What is unique to you about reliability, and how do you interpret that in the context of your mission?
Yeah, for for a while we really you thought about the terminology, like what would be the most appropriate terminology to determine that vertical axis. And quality was sort of the first word I landed on, but sometimes people associate quality with just the like the fanciness of the prose, like how flowery it's written, and that's not necessarily what we're looking for. Reliability, the definition that we have, is how much can people rely on a news source or a particular article so they can be truthfully informed and factfully informed. Those are the two main things. Like having it be true, but also have it be full of facts. I mean, literally dense with facts. And then there's a couple of other parts of that definition. You want to be truthfully and factfully informed about things that are important to you and to your community, like or other communities. So that thing that we landed on of reliability really incorporates the principles of veracity. Veracity is actually the name of one of the sub-factors that we use. But people, generally refer to it using those terms somewhat interchangeably. People will sometimes say accuracy or truthfulness and things like that. And generally, when people look at the chart for the first time, they're thinking like good at the top and bad at the bottom and okay in the middle. And yeah, we just want to dive in more precisely on what makes a news source good, what makes it okay, what makes it not so good.
So I think this is a good chance to maybe just jump right into the site because you've got an active site that people can go to and work with. You've got two tools in particular we want to examine. One is the chart itself, and then one is the methodology you have for the analysis. So I'll let you pick which one you want to start with, and we'll dive right in.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to start with the interactive media bias chart. So here's my face on top of that interactive media bias chart. All right, cool. So this is the full access version, the professional version of it. If you go to our site, adfontesmedia.com, you'll see a free version of it that has fewer news sources on it, just to make it a little bit easier to see, because you can see a ton of logos on here. What's shown is about 1,500 news source logos, but we actually have over 4,000 news sources that we display on this chart. So I'm going to blank it out here for a moment, just so we can talk about the taxonomy, what these categories mean, and then we'll get into the methodology. So the media bias chart is really two things. It's a taxonomy, system of categorization, top to bottom, left to right, and it's a methodology, a repeatable method for how to place the articles, episodes, and news sources themselves within this framework.
Now, let me interrupt for a second, if you don't mind. This particular chart right in front of us now, is this all of the sources you evaluate, whether they're, let's say, newspapers or podcasts or websites or TV shows? Because you cover a wide spectrum of sources, correct?
Yes, we do news and news-like sources. So what do we mean by news-like sources? You'll notice that there are podcasts on here. You can see the Joe Rogan podcast, which is one of the most popular ones that exists out there. And people think, well, why are you rating that if you're rating the news? But people get their information about voting, about their health, about their communities through podcasts and blogs and social media sites and influencers, YouTube channels. It's not, what the media is no longer just a handful of network TV shows and newspapers. The barrier of entry to like who produces news-like content is basically non-existent in today's world. So we rate anything and everything that folks can get their information from.
Great. So again, I interrupted you. Why don't you get back to the chart? Thank you.
No, that's quite all right. So I'll talk about this. All right, so here we have just websites showing on there, but let me blank it out. So from top to bottom, so you see in the top middle, we have this green box, and outside there's a yellow box, and then orange and red at the bottom. And that helps people just mentally. Folks are used to like green is good, yellow is like, wait a minute, and then orange and red, various signs of, caution. So things that are like in the top green box that are in the middle have are highly reliable and minimally biased. Doesn't mean they have no bias whatsoever, but it's there's a big difference between something that's just a little biased, even up to skews left and right, and things that are hyperpartisan or very extreme. So uh, we actively recommend these as reliable news sources, anything that falls in the green box. Yellow is not necessarily bad. You can have analysis and opinion and even fact reporting that has more bias. That's okay. There's certainly use for that in our discourse. It's very important, but we want to differentiate it from highly reliable news. All right, so from top to bottom, what puts things towards the very top? It's the work that journalists do. Journalists, their job is to go out and find information that would be difficult for us, lay people to find on our own, to uncover things, to report things that are new. So the highest up there is original fact reporting that's high effort, like investigative reporting, but other types of reliable news like thorough fact reporting, fact dense analysis, or even simple short stories, like a paragraph in The Economist saying this conflict is happening in this part of the world, or a local news story saying that this is happening in your neighborhood today. Those are all highly reliable. Then we've got analysis and opinion content, and it's a gradient from fact to analysis to opinion. It's not just a binary of fact versus or news versus opinion. And then as we go lower than that, there are things that are in this orange area. We title it selective or incomplete, unfair persuasion. And this is the kind of content that's quite common in our media landscape today. Unfair persuasion tactics include things like name calling, mean insults, dehumanization, vilification. And then below that, in this red area, contains misleading information or contains inaccurate or fabricated information. And we specifically stay away from the words misinformation and disinformation because those terms have themselves become polarized and co-opted. And we want to be as precise as possible. Like this article is misleading because, or this article has inaccurate information because, and have citations for that. So that's reliability. And then when you get to bias, you've got things that are in the middle, left or right, hyperpartisan, left and right. And this is our based on our U.S. contemporary politics, which moves quite a lot. So we're not trying to say, what should be left and right. We're just observing what is currently left and right in the United States. To a lot of people's dismay, that does move, has moved a lot recently. Depending on what side you're on, you'll say like one side has moved it more than the other. But we're trying to measure what the media does in response, in relation to that left-right spectrum.
I can understand top to bottom how you rate, as you said, investigative reporting and down to opinion and other stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm a little less certain of how you measure the bias and how that clearly spreads out across the spectrum here. And then you've got some lines up and down. How do you categorize bias? So I'm a left-leaning bias, I'm a right-leaning bias, but within that, how do you say like I'm really, really left or I'm really, really right or kind of right? How do you set that part of the spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, when people look at this intuitively, let me just pull out some examples. When people look at this, most of us in the United States and around most of the world have the left-right framework, and folks say, well, that's too, it's not a binary, and maybe we shouldn't use left and right. And just because there's like an axis doesn't mean we're saying it's a binary. It's this chart is not a binary at all. It's like reflecting that there's gradients. And left and right are really broad terms that they're useful shorthand. And of course, we want to get as precise as possible. on, how far left and how far right. And so we would need to like dive into sub factors and the precise reasons why we'd say something is more left or more right than something is. But when we get into that, you can see that there are certain reasons, people
So
from
we're
across the
looking at a
spectrum
bunch
can
of
agree.
dots right now. What are these
Yeah.
dots telling us?
So I pulled up two news sources that people should be familiar with, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And you'll see their overall news source scores where their logos are. So New York Times is skews left, it's in this reliable section. Wall Street Journal is in the middle, but more towards the right. And then you see all these dots, and each one of these dots is an article that we have rated from one of these news sources. And this is hundreds of articles that we've rated, and I'll get into our methodology of exactly who rates this and how, etc. But you can go to this site and click on any of these articles to see an example of article that's in the middle for bias and highly reliable. So this is from a couple of years ago about the Florida condo collapse. And you can see what's one of these is out here. It's also from a couple of years ago, where we refresh our sample every month on these highly reliable sources, adding new articles. So this is titled Opinion, and it says, "Imagine if another Bernie Sanders challenges Joe Biden." So this particular this opinion article is in the opinion section and is over to this categorized as hyperpartisan left. Wall Street Journal has articles, up here for reliability, okay, in the middle, highly reliable. And so you can, if you look at a particular article and you want to know, if you want to see if it makes sense to you, whether it's rated that it's rated there or not, then you can just go ahead and click on it. So this is a Wall Street Journal opinion, tends to be more to the right. So the overall scores reflect the mix of the sample for the sources that are left and right.
So one of the things you mentioned is you said a few years ago, you said that a couple times.
Yeah.
We're in a moment right now where the press is kind of, beating themselves up and who should have known what or who should not have known what with respect to former President Biden's mental acuity. So during that period of time, you may have rated an article that dealt with this issue, and there were some people, and I'm reminded of the Wall Street Journal, who wrote articles and said, the president is not up to the task, and then that person, I don't remember the gentleman's name, was attacked. Do you then ever go back and re-rate some articles because you may have rated them for reliability at the time, and now they really weren't reliable?
And we do go back, and we have a shift called article accountability every week, where we take high-profile articles that have been talked about on social media, especially from big news sources, where there's a critique, a dispute, a retraction, something like that, and we rate or re-rate the article based on how the outlet treated that. So there's a lot of different use cases, but folks think that it's more common well, that was this person predicted it back then and they got attacked and turns out they were right. It's usually not that simple. And when we go back on an article by article basis, we find that when our methodology helps us put it in the right place, and that tends to hold up very well over time.
So you showed us the chart, the active media chart. I think you said the one you showed us initially had about 4,000 news and news-like sources, as you call it. And then we drilled down to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and then beyond that we had little tiny dots. Now each dot represents your team having done an analysis. Can you briefly walk us through how each dot gets on that page?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a team of analysts. We have about 60, and they're all employees of Adfontes Media, mostly part-time, spread across the country, and they're balanced left, right, and center according to their own self-ratings and a bunch of other tests and peer reviews that we do throughout the course of their analysis time period at the company. So we have shifts going on all day, every single day, where folks are rating articles and episodes in pods of three, one left, one right, one center together. So when they'll go into this back-end software system. This is our system that we developed called CART, which stands for Content Analysis Rating Tool. And then they'll have a batch of articles that they're going to rate for the day. So if we click on rate here, we'll see a different screen. And at the top, there's a title. And this, when they click on that, it'll bring them to an article that they'll read. And this one is a HuffPost article. If you're familiar with HuffPost, it tends to be over to the left, and they publish a mix of news and opinion content. And then we pull in a number of stats like the word count and the parts of speech, which is helpful for some other measurements that we do. And then we pull in the text, but the most important input is this score on the blank media bias chart. So the blank media bias chart has those same categories that you saw on the one on the front, and then you've got several sub-factor sliders. So you have to turn your head a little bit to see what those sub-factors are for reliability, but they're headline and graphic, the expression, and the veracity. So we train our analysts on what to look for and consider for each one of these things. I mean, when they're going through an article, they're looking at the headline, at the the subhead. This sometimes it's a quote here, and then each of the individual sentences. So each of these sentences and the overall article can be rated for these sub-factors like expression. Expression means how it's expressed as fact, analysis, or opinion. And remember from before, this is a gradient, so we have a score of like 1 to 5. And they're not particularly even on this scale because they're meant to line up with certain categories of the chart. This is the minutia here. And then we have veracity. Veracity is like one of these sub-factors. People think of the scale as like, true, false. And this is where our fact checking comes in. But we rate content, we rate sentences, even if they're not fact checkable. And there's a lot of content in our world, like opinion content, that's just not fact checkable. It's a conclusion, it's a statement of meaning, it's an inference. Those things aren't fact checkable, but they are scoreable for veracity. And then we look at here, this is looping way back to your question about how do you measure bias. We break it down into sub-factors because there are several things that can affect the left-right bias of a news article. So this one is language, and by language we mean the characterization of political issues or opponents. The words that you use if you describe somebody as vindictive or slimy or versus crafty or strong-willed. Those differences affect the gradients of bias. If you use terms like around immigration, undocumented persons, migrants versus illegals or illegal aliens or criminal illegal aliens, that terminology will really affect the bias. And then when you're talking about political position, what we mean is the advocacy thereof within an article. You can write an article that's about climate change that's just very factual, it's not advocating for anything. And you can write an article about climate change that is very much advocating for action. And then comparison brings in things that are fall into topic selection and bias by omission. Often people will say, what really contributes to the bias is what's not in there. And that's absolutely true. So to know what's not in there, you have to look at other articles, the universe of knowable things that could be in there. It's kind of hard to rate what's not in there. But you can, we have a number of methods for accounting for bias by omission in a particular article or in a particular news source. So that's how we've done that for over 100,000 individual pieces of content over the last 5 years. It's a very labor intensive. Today we use machine learning and AI to score more articles beyond based on the training data of the 100,000 articles that we've already scored, because there's so much content out there, it's nearly infinite, and we're able to use our technology to put scores on hundreds of thousands of articles per day.
So when I go to your website, it kind of indicates that there's 4 groups of users, I'm going to call them. Publishers, obviously people who are writing the stuff will want to go to your site and see how they're scored. Advertisers, who I guess will want to go to your site if they want to reach a certain market, they can work with you to reach their market. And individuals, so someone like me who wants to go and see how someone's rated, I can go there and find it. I can drill down to these dots, etc. But the one interesting category, the most interesting category to me was educators. How are you using your site and all these tools in the world of education? How's that playing out?
I'm glad you asked. I mean, educators are sort of the reason our company exists in the first place. Consumers and educators are by far the biggest users of our website, even though we have, our business model revolves a lot around advertising. The, you know, Folks struggle to teach news literacy, which makes sense because it's changed so much. I mean, it really since about 2010 when we started getting smartphones and social media got really good on smartphones, and the delivery of news sources changed so much to be like algorithmically driven, and the barrier of entry to media got so much lower. So all of a sudden, like if we grew up with a few dozen news sources at the most, now there's tens of thousands of news sources. So teachers today teaching kids today, how do you evaluate that stuff is a very difficult and fast moving challenge. So when this chart came out, when I first put out this chart, it conveyed a lot of information in a short period of time. And, teachers had a short period of time to try to even address this in the first place. I mean, we'd hear from high school teachers that would assign, or college teachers that would assign, research paper, and their students would cite something very unreliable, and they're like, "Oh, we got to go back and we have to teach folks how to find reliable news sources, but how do we even go about doing that ourselves?" And I got the first win that this was really being used widely in education when textbook publishers would call and ask if they could publish this in a textbook. Now, back in 2017, this was just me, and it was just my very early versions of this taxonomy and methodology, and I was sort of alarmed that I was like, I don't think you should use this. It's not very academically rigorous at this point, and I knew I had to make it better over time. So that's why we, now it is quite academically rigorous. It's like cited in dozens of academic papers, but it took a long time to get there. So the educators, how they would use the chart was not only just show them here's what this company Advances Media thinks, but they'd ask for blank versions of the chart, and I thought that was genius. Because on a blank version of the chart, you have the student decide how reliable and biased a news source is. And there's various levels of that exercise you could do. Just take, what do your parents watch? Fox, CNN, MSNBC, where would you put that on the chart? Very rudimentary, just based on their, what they already know. But then you can get really detailed and have students learn our methodology. So we actually teach that. So our educational packages provide access to the full version of the media bias chart, plus lesson plans showing students how they can determine the reliability and bias of news sources themselves. Because fundamentally, that exercise of putting a dot on the chart is critical thinking. That is a critical thinking exercise. You're taking information, you're evaluating how should I interpret this, what questions should I be asking about this, and how am I going to use this. And it's a really powerful exercise.
Well, unfortunately, time flies, and we're getting down to our last few seconds here. And we've been I'm going to call this factually dense today. If I was rating this, we were very reliable at the top with a lot of great information.
I agree.
But you're the CEO and founder. Give us the closing sales pitch here of how someone can come to your site, find it, get to these tools, and use them to the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Our site is adfontesmedia.com, ADFONTES media, and use our chart, our free free resources, our free downloadable mobile app. And if you are an educator or an advertiser, we've got additional tools for your particular use cases. And yeah, we'd love to have you use our resources.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much. It was a great interview. You've got a great company. And in the world we live in today with news silos and bias and fake news, as the president calls it, a very, very timely product. I urge our viewers to find your website, and to use this great tool. Thank you again.
Have you ever felt lost in the voting booth? With 518,000 elected officials in the United States, it's no wonder. Elections are complicated. From local school boards to the presidency, there are so many choices. And that's where Ballotpedia comes in, your one trusted source. Because the only unknown on your ballot should be who gets your vote. Our sample ballot lookup tool shows you exactly who and what will be on your ballot. Just enter your address, select your upcoming election, and prepare to vote informed. You can even save your favorites and print your completed sample ballot. With Ballotpedia, vote with confidence and vote informed.
Food Bank of the Rockies is the largest hunger relief organization in the Rocky Mountain region. Currently, they are responding to the highest levels of hunger they've seen in 10 years. Through their network of hunger relief partners, including those here in Aspen, and food distribution events, the food bank is committed to providing nutritious and familiar foods to individuals across the Western Slope. Here's an example of their great work.
When I saw the long line of cars, I thought there's such a need in the valley. What it feels like when you don't have food is that you've let your family down. I'm Sherry Lee, I'm 62 years old, and I live in Grand Junction, Colorado. We were homeless, and they fed us. We're better off than we've ever been, thanks to the Food Bank of the Rockies.
I certainly hope you enjoyed learning about Ad Fontes in our first segment. I first stumbled on Ad Fontes Media when I learned that our old friend Ballotpedia is rated by them as among the most reliable and least biased news sources. If you remember that chart that Vanessa showed us, they are way at the top of that box. They're in the center, and they're about as high as you can be. So I'm very proud of them because I've got a long-standing relationship with Ballotpedia. Ballotpedia has been also very highly rated by Deloitte's Trust ID survey, which evaluates organizations based on 4 trust pillars: humanity, reliability, transparency, and capability. So a little bit different than Ad Fontes. For example, the best-in-class benchmark that they have for the Deloitte ID is reliability, and 56 is a good score. Ballotpedia gets a 64. So you see it's very reliable and very consistent with Ad Fontes. As you may already know, Ballotpedia strives to strengthen democratic institutions through accurate and unbiased political information that fosters informed democratic engagement. This is the message for today. So for our next segment, I want to double down on the concept that our democracy depends on informed voters by learning how voters can draw on Ballotpedia to stay informed, educated, and active. To help us come to think about Ballotpedia is Joel Williams. Joel, welcome to Come to Think of It.
Awesome, thanks for having me.
So you're an old timer with Ballotpedia. You don't look like an old timer in life, but you're an old timer. You're an old timer with Ballotpedia.
Yes, yeah.
You must have started when you were 7.
I get that a lot with the baby face, yeah.
And you got a very impressive title at Ballotpedia. You're in charge of the marquee team. So tell us a little bit about what you do at Ballotpedia and what the marquee team is.
Yeah, so more broadly, our marquee team is responsible for covering elections that you are more likely to come across in national headlines. So we'll take like a battleground U.S. Senate race, for example. Like there have been several in Pennsylvania recently, and we'll do sort of a deeper dive into the candidates, who they are, track the polling, who's endorsing them, that sort of thing. And then in addition to those elections, we also cover the presidential election for Ballotpedia and the administrations as they come and go. We track legislation in a bunch of different key policy areas at the state level through our legislation tracker. And then we also do a lot with voter participation. So we put out a product every 2 years called the Help Desk, and that helps people understand, when I go to the polls, what do I need in terms of ID, if anything? When are polls open? How do I find where to vote? How can I early vote? All those sorts of questions. So we're going to research that for all 50 states.
And this is certainly something that Ballotpedia has grown over the last few years. Ballotpedia is known as the Encyclopedia of American Politics, and it's a great website, but a lot more focus over the last few years has been on the voters, how to get a voter educated, how to help them get to the polls, and how to help them understand their ballot, correct?
Yeah, so back when I started in 2012, I don't think we even covered congressional elections on Ballotpedia, to give you an idea of kind of how far we've come in that time. And yeah, I think 2020 was the first time I remember a really concerted effort. A bunch of people had questions about the elections, how to vote, how was COVID messing things up, that sort of thing. And so that sort of spawned the first iteration of our help desk and helping people understand those things.
So in my first segment today, in the lead into your segment, I've been very focused on the fact that our press keeps saying our democracy is falling apart. And my theory is that press and news sources, if they keep the voters informed, if they shine transparent light on government, that's part of the framework of how this system works. And my concern has been that the press isn't doing their job. They're not accurately reporting, and that their reporting is skewed way to the left or way to the right. How does Ballotpedia manage to stay in the middle?
Yeah, so we do this in a couple of ways. I think the first one is always trying to balance the sources that we're using. So, for example, when you look at sort of the media bias charts, like you mentioned, you don't want all of your sources to be coming from one political side of the spectrum if you can. But we also try to keep in mind when we cover primary elections, for example, like what our audience is going to want to see on the page and what they would consider biased within their own sort of framework. So like for a Republican primary, you might not want to cite, the New York Times or the Washington Post a lot, because those are seen by people generally that vote in those primaries as like too left-leaning. But I would say so source selection is one thing, and understanding the audience that we're writing to is another. And then just, we all look at each other's work all the time, and we have a really strong culture around, I wouldn't say anything is like overtly biased that people are trying to write, but even just like, hey, this phrase that you used here, like that might not be appropriate. People might take that the wrong way. Let's like rewrite it to be more neutral. And I guess lastly would just be always sourcing quotes. So you don't want to just kind of like put some quotation out there into space, and people assume it's Ballotpedia saying it when we are really quoting some other source. So just always making sure to have really clear attribution on the quotes that we're using as well.
So one of the things that we also did in our last segment is we actually took a deep dive into the website to understand content and how a viewer can get there and work with Ad Fontest website. I'd like to do that now, if you don't mind, with Ballotpedia. I want to walk people through
Sure.
the website and give them a bit of a tutorial as to how they stay educated, how they stay informed, and how they work within the framework of Ballotpedia to just be the best voter they can be and make our democracy the best it could be.
Yeah, perfect. Let me get my screen pulled up here.
And
Okay,
you notice I'm
awesome.
having you do this because I'm a technological moron and I could never do this. So,
Okay, great. So this is our Ballotpedia homepage here. This is what I would consider kind of like the one-stop shop for viewing our website and using it if you've never been there before. So there's a bunch of different things here. So up at the top, you can obviously learn a bit about us if you want to volunteer with Ballotpedia or even apply to work here with us. Right here below our mission. These couple stories up here are usually the things we ran in our brew, which is a newsletter we'll talk about later, for the day. But this kind of provides you like the most interesting, relevant, timely sort of content, like things we've updated or written about most recently, that sort of thing. So you can click these and navigate to, for example, this is about our retiring incumbents in 2026, and you have this great page all about the folks who aren't running for re-election for Congress next year. So going back to this, also on the right, you'll see there's some trending articles. So these are just what other people are looking at on Ballotpedia right now. You'll see Ohio issue 2 is trending. I think that's an election that's happening today, or maybe it's next week. I can't remember offhand. But you can see kind of in real time what people are looking at, and it's always pretty interesting. On big election nights when California is voting, this list will be like poll closing times and then 4 California ballot measures, because those are always just like the most popular articles on Ballotpedia by a lot. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can find our sample ballot lookup tool, which I think is one of the primary ways people engage with Ballotpedia. There are some jurisdictions, mine included, that will send you a sample ballot in the mail, and there are many that do not. And so what you can do is you can put in your address here. You can optionally put in your email, and then click View My Ballot, and that will let you see, okay, on your next election at that address, who's on your ballot. You can click in and read their Ballotpedia profiles, things like that. So this is probably if you want to see like a very something that will help you understand what's on your ballot next for you personally, you can use this tool.
And
it'll show you
Ballotpedia,
that.
from my personal knowledge, probably offers more ballot coverage than any other source other than the actual ballots, you know, in the ballot box themselves.
Yeah, and let me, I actually should have pulled up an address here first. I'm just going to use when we look up sample ballots, we like to use McDonald's because they're pretty much everywhere. And I'm just going to pull this up to show an example of Trenton, New Jersey. I'm not going to put in my email.
All right, so
And you'll
if
see,
I'm out
okay,
getting a
if-
cheeseburger and some fries and I'm sitting in that McDonald's, here's what's going to come
Yep.
up. Okay.
Yep. And then I know the primary is first, so I'll just click on this. I'll click go, and you can see Governor of New Jersey is on the ballot. You got photos of all the folks here. You can click in and see, you know, Jack Chitterelli. What is he? You know, what's his education like? How can you see more stuff here about him? That sort of thing. You can scroll these back and forth there. If I go to listen, you'll see the assembly is also on the ballot.
And
you can
just
see
for
the couple
people's
pages further.
general edification, I don't want people are going to watch this. New Jersey has statewide elections in off-cycle years. So in 2025
yeah.
this year, they are going to vote for governor, and they are going to be having their primary in June of this year. So they're very unlike most states in terms of timing
Yes,
for that
yeah,
particular
there's only a
election.
couple that do.
So the one we're looking
Yeah,
at now,
exactly.
again, someone may be watching this 2 months from now, but the fact is, as we're watching it, people who live in New Jersey at that McDonald's getting those burger and fries, this is what their ballot's going to look like.
Yes, exactly. Not this exact design, but this will show you kind of who's on your ballot. Because obviously some states have closed primaries where if you're a registered Republican, you won't see the Democrats on the ballot. Here, you'll see just the Republicans, that sort of thing. But this will give you an idea of all the candidates that are running in that race. So yeah, that's probably the best way to explore kind of upcoming elections. Other items that are on the homepage you can kind of dive into is Ballotpedia News, which is our standalone news site. And this is just a list of like the most recent stories there. So you'll see what we've been writing about and sort of publishing and putting out into the Google News feed. We've got On the Ballot, which is Ballotpedia's podcast. So if you're interested in audio format, sort of deeper dives into some topics that we go over on that show, you can click the links there to either, you know, just go to the On the Ballot page, which looks like this. We've got embeds here if you like Spotify, YouTube, that sort of thing. Transcript if you want to read the transcript. Or you can look into individual, these are the most recent episodes here. And then if you keep scrolling down, we've got just some other items here people might be interested in. So presidential coverage, obviously always a hot topic in the national news. Ballot measures, which is kind of our bread and butter, what we were founded on. And then this is what you were talking about with the election help desk and kind of helping people understand how to vote and sort of like how to participate. This is the 2024 version. We'll make one for 2026, but you know, this is very FAQ format. There's just questions here, you know, like, is my employer required to grant me time off to vote? You can click on that and find out if your state requires that sort of thing. So again, just kind of all sorts of educational resources here for folks. We've got just some other big content here. We've got upcoming statewide elections on the right side as well. So you can see, you know, South Carolina has some local elections coming up next week, along with a couple other states. And then newsletters is probably the other place I would send to people if they want to kind of engage with Ballotpedia's content initially. We've got a bunch of different offerings here. You can click into each of these and see some examples of past newsletters here. So with previous editions, you could click and come read, that's tomorrow's, today's version of the Daily Brew, which is our daily newsletter. So this one is, you know, 3 topics that we're really interested in that we're writing about that are timely, kind of more connected to current events, that sort of thing.
So
we've
go
got
back
Hall Pass,
1 second,
which-
Joel. Go back.
yes.
Go back to where you were for a second now. So let's
Yep.
say I'm interested in the Daily Brew. I go to that homepage. I scroll down.
Yes.
And I click on Daily Brew, right? And then
Yep.
just over where your head is on my screen, it says "Get your cup of
Yes,
Daily
yeah, here
Brew,"
you go.
and it's got email and first name. So it's just as simple as putting
Yes.
in the email address, first name. Tell somebody you're not a robot, and then it's just going to pop up in their email every day.
Yep, exactly. You'll get it. It's like 6 a.m. Eastern, something like that, before I'm awake in Chicago.
And I'll do
but
a
it'll
quick
be in your
commercial.
box.
I'll do a quick commercial for Ballotpedia. There's no charge for any of these services, correct?
Yes, yeah, totally free.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's go back and if you have a minute, you think, do a quick run through of each one of these, because the viewers may be interested in specific topics here.
Yeah, awesome. So Hall Pass is the next one. This is our school board focused newsletter. So we talk about school board elections, school board policy, really just kind of deep dive down into that, the educational politics going on there. And that's a weekly newsletter. So all of these except for the brew are going to be either weekly or monthly. So we won't like clog up your inbox with a bunch of stuff. Weekly brew is like a weekly version of our brew. We feature fewer stories. We kind of pick the highlights from the past week, the ones people have clicked on most or read most, that sort of thing. Economy and Society is a policy-based newsletter. So this is about business and politics. So that's a weekly one. We've also got Checks and Balances, which is about separation of powers, sort of like administrative state policy type issues. Super interesting. It's very, I don't say academic and kind of turn people off, but it is one that you'll definitely learn a lot from reading it for sure.
And again,
about
that and
kind of
that
just
one's a
how-
month. That one's a monthly.
Yes, this one's monthly. We've got Robe and Gavel, which is monthly, and that one's going to cover everything at the federal courts level. So we do a tracker on how many judgeships are vacant across the country, any Supreme Court news, if they've held hearings, if they've accepted new cases, that sort of thing. And then we've got the Ballot Bulletin, which is a weekly update on legislation, specifically in the election administration policy area. So we do a lot about ballot access, voting policy, redistricting, all those different sorts of areas are covered in this newsletter. And then we've got the State Ballot Measure Monthly, which is, as the name implies, a monthly newsletter. And that one just tracks all the various ballot measures across the country, sort of like which ones have turned in signatures, which ones have been cleared to circulate, which ones have made the ballot, that sort of thing. So yeah, and then each of these has a box where if that one is interesting to you, you can put your email, first name, sign up, and you'll get it the next edition there.
So we have a few minutes left here. Where else do you want to take us quickly on the website or within the world of Ballotpedia to help the viewers understand how they can be better voters?
Yeah, so if you want to jump into just sort of topical things, over on the left here, you'll see right now we have 2024 and 2025, and we'll transition that soon to 25 and 26, kind of as the calendars roll over. But you've got all sorts of topical things here. So if you're interested in the 2024 election results, for example, you can pop this page up here, and it'll say, we've got election updates, and you can just kind of scroll and read everything from presidential on down the ballot. If you want to kind of drill into different areas there, you can click these little drop downs and you'll see, presidential election, just a bunch of pages related to each of these topics that we think readers would find interesting. So for 2025, you can click and see just what's coming up. This calendar has a lot of elections on it. If you scroll through, I won't try to read you everything, but like we have even individual school districts in some states we have election dates for. So if you're in Beaverton, Oregon, and you didn't know there's a school election coming up, well, you're in luck because there is, and you'll know it through the calendar. Um, and then we've got other coverage areas here, like the Trump administration. So you can check in on cabinet nominees, kind of that confirmation process, executive orders, vetoes, those sorts of things. And there's like general government and public policy pages. You can read all the stuff we have about the administrative state, federalism, those sorts of things. So yeah, I would say just the general homepage on the front, and then this left sidebar has more than enough to keep you exploring for several days if you really want to know about politics at any level.
And the homepage is ballotpedia.org, right? Not .com.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Ballotpedia.org will take you right there. You won't get Joel's friendly face in the screen, but if you follow his advice, I think you should be able to navigate that pretty successfully. Well, thanks, Joel. I'm so glad you did this. I've spent a lot of time with my viewers over the years learning content from Ballotpedia, but again, the theme for today is how people can be better educated as voters. What are the sources they can go to that they can trust? And certainly Ballotpedia is at the top of that list. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for stopping by today. As always, we hope you had fun. We hope you got educated. And these are very important topics. We can't begin to cover them in an hour, but, and this is my own personal bias showing through here. I want to be an informed voter. I want to make intelligent decisions, and I really just don't know where to go anymore. So if you're struggling as I am, you can now start with Ad Fontes if you want. You can look at their media bias chart and get a sense of what you want to be studying. I know that Vanessa threw a lot of stuff at us today, but as she mentioned, she may have gone too fast. They've got news sites there. They've got video content. They've got websites. So anything you're looking for, podcasts, pretty much across the board, you can go there and start your inquiry to say, is this a place I want to be? What kind of news reporting am I going to get? And as Vanessa herself said, it's not necessarily bad to be on the left or right, but you should know when you start, what your starting point is and what your frame of reference is. So I highly recommend that. When it comes to Ballotpedia, there's nothing better in my estimation for where you need to go to be a truly informed voter, and that is the bedrock of our democracy. Informed voters, timely voting, and if we get that and you stay informed and everybody stays informed, I don't think we have to pay as much attention as the press wants us to right now to all this doom and gloom about our democracy. Thank you for joining us on Come to Think of It. We look forward to seeing you at our next episode. Thank you.